Hello and welcome to Reading for the Love of It Presents. My name is Erica Townsend and I am the Executive Administrator with the EYS Reading Association and the conference organizer of Reading for the Love of It. I am pleased to have join me today Devin Fan of the Fan Brothers and co-creator of this wonderful children's book, The Barnabas Project. Please note that you are joining us in listen-only mode. That means that we cannot see or hear you, but you should have no difficulty in watching or listening to the presentation. Devin Fan is an artist, poet, and youth worker who has a passion for nature, adventures, and kung fu. The Barnabas Project is his first children's book and marks the first time all three Fan brothers have written and illustrated a picture book together. The book was the 2020 Governor General's Award winner for Young People's Literature Illustrated Book. Please join me in welcoming Devin Fan.
"What does it mean?" said Barnabas, looking up at the strange red stamp. "It means you're going to be recycled," said Pip. "That's what happens to all field projects." "You'll be fluffier afterwards," offered Pip kindly. "And you'll be cuter, and your eyes will probably be bigger." "I like having small eyes," said Barnabas, although he wasn't even sure anymore. Barnabas slumped in his jar. He wasn't fluffy enough, and his eyes were beady, but he liked himself, just the way he was. And what if, after he was recycled, peanuts and cheese were no longer his favorite foods? What if his friends didn't recognize him after? What if he no longer cared about green trees and mountains lit with their own stars? "We need to escape," said Barnabas suddenly. Welcome, everyone. My name's Devin Fan. I'm one of the Fan brothers, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about our book, The Barnabas Project, published by Tundra Books. This is a book that I created with my two brothers, Eric Fan and Terry Fan. It was actually my first picture book, although they have many more, which I'm sure you may be familiar with. So I'm so happy to be joining you today as part of the series from Reading for the Love of It. And I know, like you, you're probably disappointed that we weren't able to do something in person, but I'm still happy to be able to share a little bit about our book today and to meet some of you, at least in this format. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining. So the other thing I find I'm happy about is that I know that a lot of people joining today are probably educators, or maybe you're a librarian or a teacher. In any case, someone working in some capacity with books and working with children, which I think is the perfect audience. And I have so much respect for that field. I worked for the TDSB myself long ago, but I've been in public service my whole life as a professional career, as a youth worker, which is something I still do. I work at the Native Youth Resource Center every day. So I know how important that work is, and I want to acknowledge kind of what you do on a daily basis, which is I'm going to touch a little bit on that today. So this book, The Barnabas Project, is at its heart kind of an adventure story. I read a little snippet there leading up to the point where Barnabas decides that he and his friends have to escape from their prisons and their little bell jars and the secret lab that they're in. But in addition to being an adventure story, which I think is kind of what grabs kids in the first place, is that adventure element. And for me too, because my brothers and I, we all grew up loving adventure stories, adventure movies, and we kind of worked that into this. The love of that kind of comes through in this book as well. It's a little bit cinematic. But in addition to that, and having the book's been out for a couple of years now, and I've had the opportunity to do readings and to meet with children and teachers from all around the world, because it's in a whole bunch of different languages. And I've been doing readings for classes, again, in many different locations. And I think the thing that I have found to be most interesting is that it's actually the themes that the kids have been interested in, even almost more than the adventure element. And that I've had some amazing discussions that have kind of come out of reading the story and talking about the characters and themes to children. And some of those important questions are, what does it mean to be perfect? I know in our story, the green rubber suits who kind of represent the other, or people looking, society looking at you from the outside, all they can see in Barnabas is that his eyes are too small and that he's not fluffy enough, he's not colorful enough. But what they don't see, and which comes through in the story, is that he's brave and compassionate, and that he's resourceful. And so I think for the kids, when we're having these discussions, it's trying to find out, which qualities do you think are most important? And are those things, I found that the children reading the story often think that, that the failed projects, in this case, this misfit group of creatures, is more endearing in some way than the perfect pets that end up being the kind of their perfect representations later. So all that stuff ends up, it's a great foundation for amazing discussions with children really of all ages, because I've done kind of more different levels of readings for all kinds of kids. So I think that the book is a great platform for those kinds of discussions. And I think they're important discussions. And I think our goal in the end, one of the messages of the book, is that you don't have to be perfect, and to kind of question what that means in the first place. I know for my brothers and I, growing up in the 60s and 70s, mixed race at a time when that was not a common thing, went through a lot of bullying and racism and all kinds of different things. Very much identified with this idea of being a failed project. So that's kind of where that story element comes from, and why it resonates with us, and why I think it resonates with a lot of children who are reading it, because regardless of whether or not you're mixed, Barnabas himself happens to be half mouse and half elephant, but whether or not that's your background, I think we all, no matter what our background, have had some experience with feeling less than, feeling like we don't fit in, feeling to a certain extent like a failed project. I know I certainly have in my life many times. And I know working with youth as a youth worker, that's one of the things that so many people for all kinds of different reasons are struggling with, is that whole concept around self-esteem, what it means to kind of feel happy in your own skin and feel comfortable with who you are. So that's where I think the most interesting stuff comes out of. And I think, as whether you're a librarian or a teacher or someone that just works with children in some kind of capacity, one of the things I'm always on the lookout for is finding those, in my case, youth, but I've worked with children as well, and those children, and you've probably spotted them before, who do kind of see themselves as failed projects. And I know I went through a period in my life where I was painfully shy over different experiences that I had, where I went through a couple of years where I could barely speak to anyone. And I see that in other children and youth. I know where that feeling comes from, and maybe you do too. If you've been working with kids, I'm sure you've seen kids like that. And those are the kids, I kind of think about when we were writing this book, because I think all of our little failed projects have that feeling that obviously they've been labeled as a failure by society, or in this case, the scientists, the green rubber suits, labeled that they're not good enough in some way. And I think that we miss out on so much if we don't get the stories, and we don't, I think of all the incredible potential of all those children out there that feel that way, and all the imagination they have and the stories they have to tell. And I think it's just such a tragedy to me if we don't try as educators, as youth workers, as teachers, as librarians, to create an environment where we can actually get those stories, where we can have people feel comfortable enough in who they are to be able to share with the rest of the world without having that failed sticker put on them. So that's the kind of background of the story. I won't so much tell you what happens in the story, because that's the adventure of Barnabas and his friends trying to escape from this secret lab. But all this other stuff is kind of really what it's about. So I hope you enjoyed the little snippet that I read. I hope you enjoy the story itself. If you do have a chance to read it or share it with people, I've had a great joy of my life has been being able to share this story with people around the world. And I think it can really start those really interesting discussions around self-esteem, around what it means to look at yourself as perfect or imperfect, and how that looks in kind of today's society, which is influenced by so many different things that even we didn't have, or I certainly didn't have growing up, like social media and TikTok and the images kind of that are out there in the ether, that children today have to deal with. My own children, I have 3 kids, so of different varying ages, so I've kind of watched them all go through that. As far as kind of more concrete things, other than the discussions that you can do, the other great joy has been seeing the projects that kids from around the world have come up with, doing kind of their own, we call it create your own creature feature. So it's like this idea of creating their own. They can either choose to do, I actually did this with my own kids as well, where they choose to create their own. You can either choose to create a perfect pet or a failed project, depending on what you want to do. Interestingly enough, the idea for Barnabas came many more than 30 years ago, when I myself have always kept all kinds of interesting pets of different kinds. I was lucky enough, my dad always said, as long as I looked after it, I could keep whatever I want. So my room was full of aquariums, full of mud puppies, just like the strangest things that I would keep. But my dream pet has always been, I always wanted to have a little elephant that I could hold in my hand. So I remember at the time, I said, well, if you're going to have that, you'd have to genetically engineer this little elephant so that it had the DNA of something else to make it small. And I came up with a mouse, and that's where the idea for Barnabas came from. The idea was originally to create a perfect pet for myself. So that's the backstory, and that's what he ended up looking like there. You can see. I think he would be a perfect pet. So he was originally my perfect pet idea. Ended up being a failed project in this story. But one of the things you can think about doing, if you're a teacher or if you're working with children in some capacity, this is a really simple template, but you don't even need it to make your own. So this is one where we can draw your own perfect pet. And then all along the side here, and the reason we did this is actually what we did as a backstory for all the characters in the book have their own secret file that we have. We have a case file, their name, their primary food, the characteristics, the genome source, so where they came from. In Barnabas, it would have been elephants and mouse. The habitat, so where they like to live. Handling protocols, and project status, so whether they're a failed project or a perfect pet. But you can do this in your own. You can do it in all. This is just an idea. You can do it in all kinds of different ways. And as a sample, you can kind of look at, we did again have these for all the failed projects and perfect pets, but here are the project notes for Fertile. So we have all kinds of kind of behind the scenes information on him. So you can do it as pictures. The other thing that you can do, I'm going to show you a little bit more of it. This is actually a gift from my brothers to me. And it was created by Dina Sefferling, who's an amazing artist. But this is Bumble Bear, and you can actually do a 3-dimensional representation as well. I gotta show this guy to you because I think he's so amazing. He even has little see-through wings and his own little bell jar. But you can do this with an inverted mason jar. I've seen people around the world using clear, the 2-liter pop bottles cut in half so that it comes down and at the top looks like a mason. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. You can make it simple, you can make it complicated like this one. But I can tell you that kids have so much fun creating their own failed projects and perfect pets. And I wish I could share, but I've seen the most amazing things people have sent us from around the world. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed a little tiny bit of the backstory of our book, where it came from, and kind of what motivated the themes in it. So happy you chose the time to spend some time finding out a little bit today. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the amazing series. I'm going to go check some of them out myself because I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for taking the time. Once again, Devin Fan of the Fan Brothers, and talking about our book, The Barnabas Project, published by Tundra Books. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of this series.
That was a wonderful presentation, Devin. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Tundra Books, a kids imprint for Penguin Random House Canada, and all of you for joining us today. Please note that I will be giving away a copy of The Barnabas Project to a lucky winner. And that's it for today. I hope that you will join us at a future webinar. But until then, I also hope that you will continue reading for the love of it. Bye for now.